Since last week, we have been looking at reasons we should be poor in spirit. And among these reasons are: 1. Unless we are poor in spirit, we cannot appropriate the grace of God. That's episode 41. And 2. Unless we are poor in spirit, we cannot see how precious Christ is. That's episode 42. Today we will focus on the third reason. Unless we are poor in spirit, we cannot go to heaven. When Jesus says, God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for Him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs, He was getting to the very heart of the gospel. Those who know they are poor and cannot make it on their own, but realize their need for God, they will go to heaven. And the reason they will go to heaven is not because they are poor in spirit, but because they are poor in spirit to realize that they need God to help them to go to heaven. Poverty of spirit is not spiritual luxury. Quite the opposite. To be poor in spirit is to live dependently on God. At the heart of the Bible and right to the very heart of the best news in all the world is that nobody is fit for heaven. Nobody is ready for heaven. Nobody deserves heaven. Nobody can expect to go to heaven unless God steps in and provides a way by grace and by mercy that through faith, not through any good deeds or merit, could get me there. The poor in spirit are poor for a reason. They have been delivered from self-efforts and self-righteousness and self-dependence. It is this poverty of spirit that has made them the richest of all men. They are blessed with a divine blessing. To be poor in spirit is to have heaven as your inheritance. God blesses those who realize their need for Him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. If you have noticed, I have been quoting Thomas Watson, and you got it right. I want to quote him again. Watson has been helping me lately to better understand the Beatitudes. He said, quote, "Poverty of spirit turns and prepares us for heaven. By nature, a man is puffed up with self-esteem, and the gates of heaven is so narrow that he cannot enter. Now, poverty of spirit lessens the soul, and now he is fit to enter in at the narrow gate. The great rope cannot go through the eye of the needle, but let it be untwisted and made into small threads, and then it may. Poverty of spirit untwists the great rope. It makes a man little in his own eyes, and now an entrance shall be weighed into him, richly into the everlasting kingdom. Through this temple of poverty, we must go into the temple of glory." Close quote. Heaven is not for perfect Christians. Heaven is the place for the poor in spirit, for those who realize their need for God, because without God, they are nothing and live an empty life. I recently saw a quote by George Whitefield. Quote, works, a man get to heaven by works? I would as soon think of climbing to the moon on a rope of sand. Close quote. That's hilarious. But you get the idea, right? Whitefield speaks the biblical language that nobody can get to heaven by human works or self-efforts. And only the poor in spirit knows that. Paul wrote in Romans chapter 3 verse 20, "No one can ever be made right with God by doing what the law commands. The law simply shows us how sinful we are." In other words, you can never be right with God if you try to go the law keeping route. And then we learn the breathtaking news that even though none of us deserves heaven, none of us is fit for heaven, None of us is ready for heaven in our own selves. Nevertheless, God made a way for us sinful human beings to be accepted as righteous, as good, as just, as law abiding, and as He accepts us as righteous in His presence. And that way is Jesus Christ. Only the poor in spirit will be given the kingdom of heaven. So the question is, as I've been asking for 2 weeks now, is, are you poor in spirit? I want you to think about it. Because when Jesus says that only the poor in spirit shall have the kingdom of heaven, He meant only those who realize that they need God, who knows that without God they can do nothing. Those are the people that will actually have the kingdom. Those are the people that are truly blessed by God. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Pilgrim Podcast. If you find it helpful, we encourage you to subscribe to the podcast or search our growing archive for more episodes. Join me next time as we journey through scripture, exploring the Christian life and what it practically means to live as a pilgrim in this world.